Hello and welcome back, listeners, to Interviews for You, the podcast where I interview different subjects with a new topic each episode. Today's episode, we're focusing on the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, more specifically, the reforms that came out because of it. And here to talk with us today is a World Nuclear Association official straight from their headquarters in London. Tell me a little bit about yourself, man.
Well, I work for the World Nuclear Association, which is the international organization that represents the global nuclear industry.
And how long have you worked with them?
I've been a member for a few years now.
Well, to be honest, I've got to ask, how much schooling did you have to go through to be able to work with them?
Well, I needed a bachelor's degree in nuclear engineering, and then I also needed a certification from the Regulatory Commission, which took me over 4 years.
That's actually pretty quick. I thought it would have ended up taking a lot more time. But looking at the rest of this, work we got ahead of us, let's go straight into the questions I've got to ask for you here I've written down. So, would you say overall a lot of the safeguards from such a situation have been effective in their entirety?
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been effective.
And to more pinpoint on one, I have to ask this one because this is a very huge debate in a lot of households. Would you say that nuclear is an effective form of generating electricity?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Any downfalls?
Not really. The main problem is finding somewhere to put the nuclear waste, which can be a problem in countries with
Smaller infrastructure, maybe?
Yes, smaller infrastructure. That's what I was looking for. But as long as the country has decent infrastructure, good laws surrounding it, it's fairly easy to find a safe place to put it. It's
that
not
makes
very
sense.
dangerous.
All right. Well, one of the things I've had a huge focus on in my life personally, what is a structural method of which, because I have a huge interest in architecture.
After a reactor meltdown or a failure of any sort that causes a reactor to be abandoned, a large structure will be built to contain the radiation produced from the disaster. They're typically a large arch, which is constructed in a separate location, then moved around the site of the disaster.
How do they move it? Is it in parts, or is it somehow in full?
It is in parts, 2 or 3 very large parts of the arch that are then moved on by rail.
By rail?
Yes, built on rail.
That's incredible. I honestly didn't think it would be moved by rail, but I guess, whatever gets to the place it needs to be. And I want to know do you have any focuses in this field, actually? I gotta ask that.
Any focuses?
With you working at the World Nuclear Association, do you focus more on laws and regulations in different countries, or are you more with the actual organizations that create the nuclear?
I'm more focused with the actual creation of energy, the actual generation.
So the companies that actually create this nuclear establishment. Now, I've actually heard that many governments are trying to phase out nuclear energy. Is this true?
Typically that's, like I said earlier, smaller countries with smaller infrastructure that just aren't able to handle the costs of starting up and building a full new infrastructure for this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not really something that you can, change out the type of power plant. It's not easily startable, I guess.
How much carbon does this actually produce? Because I know that's a lot of power people's focuses.
Nuclear energy has, in fact, one of the lowest carbon emissions of all baseload power when compared to non-carbon counterparts. Yeah, the only ones that would produce lower, wind, solar, they don't produce any, but the power that they generate is not enough to fuel cities and such. So
yeah. Now, in the case of a meltdown, is there a set of procedure that people tend to use when going through cleaning it up?
Yeah, there are. First off, the used fuel within the reactors themselves has to be removed and then sent to a special storage facility, which is usually simple and relatively safe, as there are parts of the reactor built for this, but if any of them were damaged during the accident, cooling ponds or damaged interim storage ponds, that would require special handling.
And what kind of special handling would that require, if I may ask?
Stuff you usually see, hazmat suits.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The stuff I see in the shows, all the movies and such.
Yeah, that's only when the fuel ponds are damaged.
Okay. Now I've got to know, what's so special about the Chernobyl nuclear reactor? Because I do believe it was some special sort of reactor compared to the rest of all reactors I've seen, but then again, I don't really know.
The Soviet Union didn't try very hard to make it very safe and made a major oversight, which is not commonly seen in most Western reactor designs, but the ones they used, the RMBK fusion reactors. The nuclear chain reaction and power output of the reactors could increase if the cooling water was lost or turned to steam, which led to the uncontrolled power surge, which caused the destruction of Chernobyl Reactor 4. Since then, all currently in use RMBK reactors have been modified, which makes them much more stable with low power outputs.
Accommodate for that previous failure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. Because I remember hearing from somewhere that a nuclear accident anywhere is a nuclear accident everywhere. Could you go into depth with that for me?
The general gist of that is that all countries would have to support the one affected in case of a nuclear emergency, as the nuclear damage will spread everywhere and it'll definitely affect the economy and such. They'll provide necessary supplies and equipment and training for proper officials.
There's a lot of different situations like Chernobyl that have happened. I remember there was a few in the time span of, I think, 30, 40 years, I recall. One of the major ones I recall reading was the one in Japan, I think March 2011, was it?
Mm-hmm.
What happened there, if you can really clarify about it?
Well, the site lost power, which caused the fission reactor to spiral out of control, and it caused plentiful damage to the surrounding area. While they did have backup generators, it was not enough to prevent the reactor correctly from dealing its damage since they lost all power.
Would you happen to know the wattage of the generators at all, or?
I don't believe so.
We'd have to look more into that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you, since this is your job. So nuclear waste, there's a lot of nuclear waste in all the movies that everyone watches. I think that series of HBO, I don't really recall the title. Isn't it just Chernobyl?
I believe so.
I think so. But what is the method for cleaning up nuclear waste that comes from such a situation?
Well, typically most of the waste isn't like you see in cartoons, like glowing green.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually solid carbon rods or graphite rods that were used up and heavily irradiated. So the solid radioactive wastes are temporarily stored in bunkers and then removed for treatment. 3 steps. First, stored in bunkers. Second, those wastes, as well as those from decommissioning reactor blocks 1 through 3, are then processed into a form suitable for permanent safe disposal. And then thirdly, the conditioned solid waste materials are transferred to containers suitable for permanent storage.
That's good to hear. I really didn't know all this. Now I just want to ask you one more time to really settle this whole dispute for whatever family, friends, or listeners are even on here, on interviews for you. What is your final conclusion about just overall, what would you say is good or bad about nuclear reactors in their entirety?
Well, previous nuclear reactors have only truly failed due to negligence in one way or another, whether it happened to improper construction or failure to follow safety procedures. Nuclear energy is a very viable and clean form of electricity production, despite its reputation. We as a people have to move forward to make it safer, of course, but keep in mind, at its most basic, nuclear fusion is a very safe method. Just the past of improper care toward the subject matter has put it at fault for being a risky method of electricity production.
Just listening to this just has really opened my eyes, and I wanted to thank you for coming on today, man.
Of course.
Now, I wish you a good evening and good rest of your day, and of course, keep on working at the World Nuclear Association. You seem like you're doing a great job.